When it comes to a time when our country can't make aluminum and steel, you almost don't have much of a country.
Tariffs on steel and aluminum are doubling from 25% to 50%.
Trump posting on Truth Social to call Canada a tariff abuser.
Donald Trump is selling it as a way to boost American manufacturing jobs.
Because this is a president who doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk too.
Few minutes ago, Donald Trump has exploded in anger as one of America's most vital industries comes to a sudden stop. Across the country, from Arizona's copper belts to West Virginia's coal towns, mines are shutting down, silencing the machinery that fueled U.S. manufacturing for decades. The effects are immediate. Rail cars sit unused, processing plants go quiet, and thousands of American workers brace for layoffs. As dust gathers over empty mine shafts and silent loading docks, a new reality sets in. Canada is stepping up quickly, aiming to dominate the global mineral market by supplying the copper, rare earths, and coal the world still demands. Meanwhile, America faces an abrupt and painful shortage. The warnings were there for months. The crisis began after the White House imposed a wave of tariffs, with President Trump promising to shield what he called America's bedrock industries from foreign competition. In the spring, his administration slapped heavy duties on imported copper, nickel, and rare earths, a move he claimed would force jobs back onto U.S. soil. Canada, one of America's biggest raw material suppliers, hit back with countermeasures and quietly redirected exports elsewhere. Trump doubled down, insisting the U.S. could meet its own demand and framing foreign minerals as a national security risk. But only months later, the consequences are clear. Entire communities in America's mining heartlands are paying the price. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's the best way to support the channel. Now let's dive in. In a dramatic turn, dozens of U.S. mines have halted operations. In Arizona, some of the country's largest copper facilities have stopped production, cutting off a metal critical for electronics, power grids, and defense. In West Virginia and Wyoming, coal deliveries to steel plants and power stations have slowed or stopped completely. Nevada's rare earth sites, once seen as key to reducing U.S. reliance on China, have scaled back due to soaring costs and market uncertainty. Industry experts say these shutdowns are directly tied to the tariff standoff with Canada, which used to supply billions in minerals to the U.S. every year. Without that steady stream, American manufacturers are scrambling for alternatives, while Canada rapidly boosts exports to Europe and Asia, filling contracts that once belonged to U.S. buyers. This mining freeze is shaking supply chains that keep America's factories, electronics plants, and energy projects alive. Communities that have relied on mining for generations are now in crisis. In Arizona's copper towns, layoffs are spreading fast. In West Virginia, rail yards that once bustled with coal shipments now sit half-empty. Truckers, contractors, and equipment suppliers are all feeling the hit as orders vanish. The ripple effect is already reaching America's manufacturing states. From Michigan's auto plants to Ohio's turbine assembly lines, factories depend on a steady supply of copper, nickel, and other metals. Shortages of rare earths threaten everything from smartphones to fighter jets, hitting consumer tech companies and defense contractors alike. Energy projects are also feeling the pinch. Wind farms in Texas and solar sites in California are warning of delays due to copper shortages. Commodity markets have reacted sharply. Copper prices have smashed records. Rare earths are trading at huge premiums, and coal prices have spiked. For consumers, that means higher costs on goods ranging from electric cars and appliances to smartphones and power tools. Industry groups warn that small manufacturers could run out of parts within months. Home builders say rising metal costs will add thousands to the price of new houses. Energy companies fear delays in grid modernization projects critical to meeting rising electricity demand. The defense industry is in a particularly tough spot. Rare earths are essential for radar, missile systems, and stealth technology. With domestic supply down, the Pentagon may have to rely more on countries like Australia, Brazil, or even China, a move that carries both financial and security risks. For workers, the impact is deeply personal. Families in Nevada and Wyoming are suddenly uncertain about mortgages, health care, and whether their kids will need to leave town for work. In Arizona, veterans of the copper industry say this crisis feels worse than the mining collapse of the 1980s. Local businesses, diners, hardware shops, car dealers, are already seeing sales drop. Banks in mining regions are tightening loans, worried about a drawn-out slump. State governments that rely on mineral taxes are cutting budget forecasts. Even schools are bracing for possible layoffs if closures drag on. Restarting production won't be easy. Once workers leave, many don't come back. Idle equipment needs costly repairs before operations can resume. And uncertainty makes investors cautious, slowing any rebound. Politically, the shutdowns are sparking heated debate. Governors from affected states are urging Washington to suspend tariffs or provide subsidies for critical minerals. Lawmakers warn the United States is ceding ground to foreign suppliers at a time when global competition for resources is fierce. Canada, meanwhile, is seizing the moment. Mining companies in British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec are boosting exports, grabbing contracts in Europe and Asia once held by United States firms. For decades, America and Canada operated as close partners in mining and refining, sharing expertise and supply chains. But tariffs have fractured that relationship, and Canada now stands to become a stronger global player while United States producers struggle to recover. For American workers, manufacturers, and consumers, the message is clear. These shutdowns aren't just temporary. They could mark a permanent shift in global power, one that leaves the United States more dependent on foreign sources for critical materials. In an era where minerals fuel everything from defense to clean energy, that dependence comes with heavy costs. In Canada, the contrast is striking. Mining towns are booming. In Sudbury, Ontario, ore trucks run day and night. In British Columbia, copper concentrate is shipped overseas to eager buyers. Canada's mineral industry is actively strengthening its role in the global market, backed by years of investment and modern trade deals. Where the United States and Canada once moved in lockstep, tariffs have turned them into competitors. Canadian officials are locking in long-term supply contracts with Europe, Japan, and South Korea. Thanks to agreements like CETA and CPTPP, many of these exports move tariff-free, giving Canada a competitive edge over United States suppliers. Global buyers, eager for stability after years of supply chain shocks, see Canada as a safer bet, politically stable, environmentally reliable, and well-connected to world markets. With United States mines offline, Canadian exporters are commanding premium prices while still offering dependable delivery. Copper, a cornerstone of modern economies, tells the story best. With United States mines stalled, Canada's share of North America's copper trade is climbing fast. Producers who once shipped mainly to Asia are now signing lucrative deals in Europe, taking advantage of soaring prices triggered by United States shortages. And it's not just copper. Rare earths, vital for electronics, energy, and defense, are another front where Canada is pushing ahead. By investing heavily in refining capacity, Canada aims to not only process its own output, but also take feedstock from allies like Australia and Africa. If successful, it could become the West's main hub for rare earths, sidelining United States ambitions in the process. The geopolitical consequences of this shift are huge. Control over resources has always been a powerful tool in global politics. For much of the 20th century, the United States held that leverage through dominance in energy and minerals. But now, with key sectors disrupted, Washington risks losing its bargaining power in negotiations that touch everything from trade deals to security pacts. Nations that once depended on United States-linked supply chains may instead turn to Canada, whose consistent exports offer a different kind of security. This shift could reshape alliances, especially in regions where major infrastructure and development projects depend on steady access to metals. For Canada, the upside is clear, but not without hurdles. Expanding production takes money, workers, and infrastructure. Mining projects can take years to move from exploration to output, and environmental rules, while less contentious than in the United States, still need careful handling. Still, Canadian companies are moving fast to take advantage of the moment, adding shifts at smelters, temporarily expanding existing mines, and upgrading ports in Vancouver and Prince Rupert to move more material overseas. While United States competitors remain tied up in tariff fights, Canada is redrawing trade patterns. Japan and South Korea, once reliant on a mixed set of suppliers that included the United States, are now signing expanded long-term contracts with Canadian producers. The European Union, eager to speed up its green energy transition, has signaled that Canadian copper, nickel, and rare earths could become essential inputs for its renewable power and electric vehicle industries. These deals not only secure revenue for Canadian miners, They also weave Canada more tightly into the economic networks of allied nations, creating new dependencies that strengthen diplomatic ties. Strategically, the stakes are massive. In a world where supply chain resilience is treated like national security, Canada's role as a go-to mineral supplier gives it more influence at global summits and trade talks. For the United States, losing even partial control of these supply chains is a major setback, one that could ripple far beyond economics, weakening its hand in sanctions, environmental policy, and crisis response. The transformation is reshaping corporate decisions too. Multinational manufacturers with United States plants are rethinking where they source materials, and in some cases, where they build their factories. If copper, nickel, or rare earths are more reliable through Canadian ports than through United States suppliers, companies have a growing incentive to shift production north or overseas. That possibility has United States labor unions warning of a double hit. First, the loss of mining jobs, and then the loss of manufacturing jobs that follow the raw materials abroad. Frustration is growing in American mining towns as residents watch foreign competitors gain ground while domestic operations stall. Calls for a policy rethink are getting louder, not just from industry lobbyists, but also from state officials worried about long-term survival. Yet Washington is boxed in. Political incentives reward being tough on trade, even when the economic numbers point another way. The result is a policy environment where economics, politics, and strategy are colliding, ensuring this crisis will last longer than a single news cycle. Supply chains, once disrupted, rarely snap back to normal. Buyers who sign multi-year contracts with Canadian suppliers won't abandon them quickly, even if United States mines restart. Infrastructure built for Canadian exports, from port expansions to rail links, will serve those markets for decades, locking in new trade routes. Meanwhile, Canadian firms are plowing fresh profits into automation, digital mine planning, and advanced refining tech. These investments make operations more efficient and position Canada as a leader in cleaner, high-precision mining, a huge selling point in markets where environmental performance is becoming as important as cost. European, Japanese, and even American investors are pouring money into these projects, drawn by stable returns in a sector now seen as strategically vital. This investment wave widens the gap between Canada and the United States. While United States operators deal with idle equipment and shrinking workforces, Canadian miners are building capacity that won't be easy to catch up to. A new smelter or high-tech refinery locks in advantages for decades, especially when paired with long-term contracts. Diplomatically, Canada's stronger role in minerals gives it leverage in other policy areas. In trade talks unrelated to mining, Canadian officials can point to their role as indispensable suppliers of critical inputs, subtly tying cooperation in one area to concessions in another. For allies, that's persuasive. For rivals, it's a reminder that Canada's economic power now goes far beyond timber, grain, and oil. For the United States, reversing this trend will take more than reopening mines. It means rebuilding trust with trade partners, securing investment for modern refining, and addressing the regulatory and political hurdles that have slowed growth. Until then, the balance of mineral power in North America will keep tilting north, with long-term economic and strategic consequences. If the last few months have been a shock, the next year could decide whether this is just a temporary disruption or a permanent realignment. The choice is Washington's double down on tariffs or pivot toward negotiation and supply chain rebuilding. Every month United States mining output stays constrained is another month for Canada to expand contracts, grow capacity, and deepen global ties. In the best-case scenario, Washington and Ottawa strike a deal, easing tariffs in exchange for reciprocal trade and joint investments. That could reopen cross-border flows and stabilize prices while keeping some protections in place for United States workers. But the more likely outcome, at least in the short term, is continued conflict. Neither side wants to look like it's backing down. In that environment, Canada's advantage grows. New mines and refineries in British Columbia and Quebec are already being built with Asian and European markets in mind. Once those projects come online, their output will be locked into long-term contracts, shutting United States buyers out. And global demand isn't slowing. The surge in electric vehicles, renewables, and advanced electronics will push demand for copper, nickel, and rare earths to record highs over the next decade. If the United States remains dependent on imports, costs will weigh heavily on inflation, manufacturing, and even national security. Over time, industries may shift operations abroad to secure steady supplies, hollowing out America's industrial base. This has big political consequences. In swing states with mining and manufacturing jobs, prolonged losses and higher costs could reshape elections. Lawmakers will face mounting pressure to act through tariff reform, subsidies, or faster permitting for new projects. Failure to respond risks fueling a narrative of decline, especially if Canada's sector keeps growing. Internationally, allies that have pivoted to Canada for reliable supplies may not return to United States-centric supply chains even if tariffs are lifted. Trust, once broken, is hard to restore. For sectors like defense and clean energy, this could mean a permanent change in procurement strategies, partnerships, and research efforts. In the worst case, today's standoff could split global mineral markets into two tracks, one led by Canada and its partners with stable supplies, and another where the United States pays more on the spot market, vulnerable to every global crisis. Avoiding that outcome requires a policy reset, one that sees North America's resources as integrated, not divided by rivalry. But the clock is ticking. Mines don't restart overnight, and buyers won't drop new suppliers without a good reason. The next few months will determine whether this is remembered as a stumble or as the moment when North America's mining power shifted permanently north. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Until next time, stay inspired.